this work that you and I are talking about, it takes courage to look inside and to feel stuff and to remember stuff that isn't pleasant, is not fun. So this process of becoming self-aware and transforming ourselves and stepping into our power and having the kind of relationships that we long for, and the kind of lives that have meaning and purpose, it all begins with that becoming aware. And it's a journey of discovery.
Welcome to the Permission to Heal podcast. I am Marcy Brockman. Together, we will discover what brings us meaning and true joy. You only need your own permission to begin.
Hi, I'm so excited to share with you the new Permission to Heal bookshop on bookshop.org. We all know how important it is to support our local and independent bookshops, and I've created a podcast-dedicated bookshop on bookshop.org. So just follow along with me at Permission to Heal bookshop on bookshop.org. The link will be attached to the post, and you can have access to the entire catalog of books by my expert guests. You can just click and order from the independent bookshops and support everyone. It's pretty awesome. I've also put a bookshelf with my own Permission to Land books on it, and all sorts of books for inspirational help and books that I love. So join me on bookshop.org with the bookshop, the Permission to Heal bookshop.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Permission to Heal. I am Marcy Brockman, and I am thrilled that you are here. Today, I have a really inspiring and delightfully spiritual guest, Christian de la Huerta. He's just enlightening. It's the only word I can come up with right this second. He is a sought-after spiritual leader. He is a personal transformation coach and a leading voice in the breathwork community. He has traveled the world offering inspiring and transformational retreats, combining psychological and spiritual teachings with lasting and life-changing effects. He is an award-winning, critically acclaimed author, has spoken at numerous universities and conferences and the TEDx stage. He has a book called Awakening the Soul of Power, which I have read now twice, is just really wonderful. He was described by Gloria Estefan, the multiple Grammy Award winner, as a balm for the soul of anyone searching for truth and answers to life's difficult questions. Christian's book, Awakening the Soul of Power, is the first book in his Calling All Heroes series, rethinks what heroism means in the 21st century, and reveals really practical, usable tools that you can use immediately to help you embark on a journey of personal freedom. So if you long for healthier relationships, and of course, who doesn't, and a life filled with meaning and purpose, that is the reason that we are on this earth, then this book holds the keys to unlocking the secrets of personal empowerment and unleashing your inner hero. Focuses on personal empowerment and the reasons why we do the things that we do, on intergenerational and epigenetic trauma, relationships, power dynamics within relationships, and so on, and finding out who you really are and what you're really meant to be, and helps you give yourself permission, since we're all about that, permission to unleash all of it and be your absolute, truest, most heroic, beautiful self. So I hope you enjoy this episode and that you give yourselves the permission that you need to be all that you can be. Welcome, Christian. I'm so excited to talk to you again. How are
Hey,
you?
Marcy. Good to see you again.
Yeah, your original interview with you is was one of the best interview conversations for this podcast that I've ever had.
Wow, I love that. What an honor. I
It
love
was
hearing that.
so wonderful, and it was also the source of my greatest faux pas as a podcaster because I forgot to hit record.
Yeah. Yep.
So it went poof. And you were so, I was so embarrassed. Oh my God, 16 shades of chartreuse and crimson. But you were so much of a mensch about it. And you were just like, well, the universe just wanted the conversation for you. We'll just come back and do it another time. And I was like,
Yeah.
oh, thank God.
Yeah, yeah. Stuff happens.
Yeah, you know, it was my first season. So, you learn a lot in the beginning. So, okay, so you are an amazing guy. You've got all this stuff going on with your book that we can see behind you. I love that dynamic poster. It's very awesome. The Awakening the Soul of Power. So why don't you tell us about yourself? Tell us about who you are, where you came from, what made you decide to choose this career and write your books and so on. I'm always interested in career journeys.
Huh. Well, I'm an author, speaker, retreat facilitator. I've been doing retreats and events and coaching people individually for over 30 years, um, which is incredibly humbling and fulfilling to know that what I do actually has an effect in real human lives and makes a real difference. It's um, for me, there's nothing better. That's what gives my life the most meaning. Um, I'm Cuban originally, so I was born in Cuba. Came to the States when I was 10, which was not an easy thing to do because I didn't speak a word of English. And we first landed in a small little town in Georgia, Milledgeville, Georgia, in central Georgia, where I didn't have anybody in my class that spoke the language. I mean, that spoke Spanish. And so it was an interesting and very harrowing experience. It was sort of like sink or swim, where I had to learn how to speak English. And I was a good student growing up. It's one of the benefits of having been raised in a communist country for my first 10 years is that we had a TV, but there was nothing worth watching. So we grew up reading books and creating and inventing our own games and pastimes because there were a few toys to be had. And for that, I'm really grateful. But here's what's interesting. I was really shy too as a teenager, to the degree that looking back on it, I was had a 4.0 in high school except for one B. And I got that B my
1B,
last
that's so embarrassing.
my last semester. And I didn't set out to do this intentionally, but looking back on it, I know that I did it subconsciously to sabotage my GPA. Because at that point in my life, there was no possible way that I could have gotten up in front of an auditorium filled with hundreds of people to deliver the valedictorian speech. There's just no way. I wasn't even close to being ready to do that. And flash forward to now, where I've spoken all over the world. I've spoken at dozens of universities on the TEDx stage. And I only share that to illustrate that all the stuff that happened to us when we were young, all the traumas, all the challenges can all be overcome and can all be transcended and can all be healed. And so I use a lot of that in the processes of healing and empowering people in my work.
It's a beautiful story. I think that we're both testaments to that, to the logic of that. I was exceedingly shy as a child. And I remember, I don't know how old I was, but I remember very clearly my mother telling me a story about how painfully shy she had been her whole life and how limiting she felt that was. And I saw it keep her out of doing things with my dad because she was still married to my dad at the time. And it affected their marriage, and it affected her friendships. It affected the things that she would allow herself to do. And that sort of sat in the back of my mind for a little while. And then I got to high school. I was 14 years old. I was a freshman in high school, and I just had this light bulb moment where I realized that if I stayed being the shrinking violet, the girl, holding up the wallpaper and what do they call that? A wallflower. If I stayed being that girl, I would miss out on all these things that I wanted to do, like join the crowd of kids talking and having fun instead of sitting in the back, or, try out for the school musical, or, whatever the things were. And so I had this moment where I said, so what is the worst thing that could happen if you walk over to that group of kids and you just start talking to them? What's the worst thing? Worst thing is they don't talk to you. They make fun of you. They don't laugh at anything that you said. Like I could be ostracized, but that's the worst thing. I'm not going to die. I'm not going to get sick. The earth's not going to swallow me up. There's going to be no cataclysmic thing, and I'll just walk away. And they welcomed me with open arms. Oh, we were hoping you'd come chat with us. And I said something that I thought was funny, and they thought it was funny. And I was, I can do this.
That's great. What a beautiful story. That you just work through that in your own mind. For me, it took later. For me, it wasn't through, like, I got through college without getting up in front of a room and speaking. I could do okay from the classroom, from my desk. But getting up in front of the room, that was some kind of psychological stuff. I just couldn't do it. Like many people have that.
Yeah.
And so, but I always had this sense of mission, this sense that I had work here to do in terms of helping other people, helping humanity.
What do you think inspired that thought? I mean, not everybody has a thought like that. Where did that come from?
I always did. I don't know where that came from. And it showed up in different ways at different times in my life. Like I grew up in a very Catholic environment, and one of 9 kids.
Wow.
So further evidence that the Vatican roulette is not very effective. But in those days, I thought I wanted to be a priest, and that's how it showed up. It didn't come to be. But later,
lifestyle, but could have the same kind of impact.
Yeah, well, that religion, as it turned out, didn't have enough room for me. So we eventually discovered that. And so so I studied psychology. My dad was a psychiatrist, so I think maybe that was an influence. But that was always there. And then I got to the point that psychology was not enough. It just didn't involve all of us, all humanity, all aspects of being human, because it doesn't address the spiritual. And so eventually I got to a place in my life where I was balanced, where I found the balance between the physical and the spiritual and the psychological and the mental. And so my work now is balanced and addresses all of who we are, not just part of who we are.
That's very interesting. I've been on this path, this quest myself, as I think so many of us are. We're not just one thing. I used to think that people were just one thing, but I think that was just the people that I had known back then that were just one thing, or my view was limited. Anyway, so I do so many different things that confuses other people, but I've just decided December 1st, I woke up with this epiphany that the next step in my path is to go back to grad school for the 3rd time and become a therapist.
Wow.
So I, in June, am starting another master's program in mental health counseling, clinical mental health counseling. So
I love that you're doing that.
Me too. I'm very excited. So, I have 7 years
and
left
you're
as
going to
a
continue
teacher.
teaching?
Well, I have 7 years left as a teacher, and I'm not leaving before my pension is full. Like, I'm not leaving any money on the table. I've worked too long for that.
Seriously.
And
paid your dues teaching high school. Yikes.
Yikes, right? So it's going to take me probably 4 years to get done with the coursework and all the hours of, that I have to put in before I can even take the licensing exam and all of that stuff. So I figure, I'll do that part of the time while I'm teaching the last 3 years, and then do that when I retire.
That sounds good to me. And I didn't mean like in terms of like knocking, high school kids.
No, no, no.
It's
It's
just
not
that
for
from what I
everyone.
know from teachers, friends who are teachers, that teaching high school can be really challenging.
Well, I find it's a much more natural fit for me than middle school was. I started as a seventh grade English teacher when I first started, and they're still very little. They're young, they're 12, 13 years old, and I was limited with what I could talk about and the literature
Mm,
we could read and so on. And I really yearned to get into meaty, humanistic topics with kids. And so high school, 11th and 12th grade is the perfect fit because I get to really talk about emotional intelligence and
mm.
help them understand and get to know themselves through the literature that we read. So, which
Oh,
is
beautiful. And
really
I
where
mean,
I'm
thank
going.
you for doing that work. I have teachers in my past who deeply impacted my life. So I know that the right teacher can really make a difference in somebody's life.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So and
And
the fact
the
that you're
right student
addressing,
can make an impact on a teacher's life.
of course, yeah, seriously. Yeah.
So tell us about your book, Awakening the Soul of Power. It's, if I remember correctly, the first book in a series called Calling All Heroes that you are
Correct.
intending to write.
Yes. I'm halfway done with the second book, which is on relationships.
Okay.
This one came out last year, and I wrote it because in my retreat work and observing the people who go through my retreats and the kind of stuff they're challenged by, um, the situations in life that they struggle with, I've come to realize that most of us have an ambivalent relationship to power, maybe even conflicted. Like part of us wants it, part of us is afraid of it.
What do you mean
I
by
think,
power? Can I interrupt?
yeah, well, I'm talking about personal power.
Okay.
Our ability to exert our agency, our preferences, our dreams, our thoughts, our
Okay.
beliefs in the world, right? And within relationship dynamics. Um, and so what happens under the surface of our minds is that we believe that if we really step into our power, into our potential, into all of who we are, that other people may not be able to handle it, and that we might end up rejected and alone. And I think we also fear that we might abuse it. And no wonder, like how many times have we witnessed abuses of power? All we got to do these days is turn on the news to witness at least one abuse
Right.
of power.
Just look toward Russia right now.
And we're like, oh my God, oh my God. Um, and that's representative of what we're facing, that dynamic that we're facing as a species. Like, how do we want to be with each other, and how do we want to be in relationship to power? What
Right.
kind of relationship do we want to have in this world in relationship to power? And so when you add to the mix the fact that we've been conditioned to believe that power is a bad thing, power is negative, with quotes like power
Absolute
corrupts.
power corrupts. Absolutely. Right.
Exactly. But and who wants to be corrupted? But what they didn't tell us about that quote is that Lord Acton was speaking specifically about political power, not personal power that we're talking about. And so when you add to that mix the fact that we've also been conditioned to believe that the emotions are weakness, that especially men, little boys don't cry. And that's a whole other conversation about the faulty assumptions about why we were taught that. Um, but when you put all it into mix, what happens is that we avoid conflict, we hate confrontation, and so we stuff ourselves. We say yes when inside we feel no. And the sad part, Marcy, is that we do it for kind of lame reasons. We sell ourselves out in our own personal power, on our preferences, our dreams, our
Mm-hmm.
thoughts, our beliefs, our desires, for an illusion of security, for a false sense of acceptance, and for crumbs, morsels of pseudo love. So what this
I did
book
that for
talks
the
about,
first 40 years of my life.
I know,
Yeah.
I know. I speak from experience myself. This isn't something that I read in a book.
Sure.
And so what the book guides the reader through is like, how do we step into power, into our own power, in a way that's not about hierarchy, control, abuse, force, domination, that doesn't require that we push anybody down, step on them, in order for us to feel powerful. Like, how do we do it in a different way that is a match for who we are inside? and it's for everybody because we all struggle with issues of power, around power, but it has a particular message for women. And that comes from my belief, my conviction, really, that the empowerment of women is the single most important thing that needs to happen in the world. And it's not to put women up on a pedestal. It's not to idealize women. Women also abuse power. It's because as a world, as a species, we've been functioning so off kilter, so off balance between the masculine and the feminine energies. Mm-hmm. And I believe that when women are in 50% of power in this world, and we're not even close to that,
no,
not even in this country, that we're going to have a very...
Just look at Congress.
I know, that's exactly my visual. That's exactly what I go to. And, you know, the number of governors, mm-hmm. the number of CEOs, etc. When women are in 50% of power,
even we're going to have principals.
Yeah, school principals. Well, there's a lot of women school principals. There's more balance there. I don't know about the numbers, but there seems to be more balance there. And you would definitely know more than I do in that area. But anyway, when women are 50% of power, we're going to have a very different relationship to war and poverty and hunger and social justice and the distribution of wealth and how we treat the environment and to all of it. And so that stems my conviction in dedicating the book, and giving a lot of examples that will be supportive to women.
I agree with you. And I believe that even if you go down to the micro level, to the family level, that empowering women to be more powerful in their own families, to be more powerful in their own bodies, in their own communities, that it would lift up families and lift up groups in communities, and teach children in the next generation how to be more powerful and how to go after what they want personally, and so on. I think it's not just a big macro thing for the culture. I think you could take it down to the literal individual level.
Definitely. And I think they've done studies of that. I think we have evidence for that if you want to make a difference in either a family or a village or a society, start by educating women.
Yeah, I've heard statistics about, I don't remember them, but about even companies that were giving microloans to indigenous communities, and that they specifically gave microloans to women, to moms, so that they could lift up their entire families and their whole villages and all of their indigenous communities that way. And
exactly. That's the first time that I read about that information. Yeah. Was with the microloans.
That's a very cool thing. Very cool thing. So the next book then builds upon this personal power idea and how we use power in our relationships.
Yes, I think, because part of I also do a year-long coaching program, which sounds more challenging than it is because people think, oh my God, I have to commit to a year, but it's piecemeal. It's bite-sized content that I deliver every week. And what I've discovered, because I've been doing weekend retreats for a long time, over 3 decades, what I saw was that in some cases people would come for a weekend and have this amazing transformational expansion, and if they didn't have a support system, if they didn't have a practice, if they didn't have like where to hang up in their lives whatever that learned, mm-hmm. If they didn't have a structure of accountability, it's easy to get sucked back into the day-to-day and the demands of life and the infinite distractions of life. And then pretty soon the old voices of fear and self-doubt, the self-defeating behaviors, the self-sabotaging of our relationships, all those mm-hmm. behaviors will start sneaking up again and dragging them down. And then they'd have to come to another retreat. What I'm loving about this structure is I separate and deliver the content bite-sized, just a little bit each week, but with 2 key differences. One is interactivity, which I'm not able to do on a weekend. So I give their homework and simple stuff that you could do in 10 minutes, or that you could just live in that question in the back of your mind throughout the week. But making sure that those concepts don't stay at the level of information, because we don't need more information. We've got an information overload.
We need usability. We need
It's
applicability.
exactly, it's about applying it to our lives, integrating it so that it becomes transformation, not just information.
Oh, I
And
love that.
so,
Transformation, not just information. That's great.
yes. And so the other thing that the other way that I can support people this way is accountability. So coaching calls with me for both support and accountability, keeping us doing what we said we were going to do. Because again, we're so easily distracted. There's so many things grabbing at our attention, that to help us stay on track. That's where those biweekly coaching calls come in. And I think I forgot your original question.
So did I. So it's fine. So let's just go with this. I love the organic of all of this. This is great. I usually prepare questions, but most of the time they're just in the back of my head in the ephemera, and we just go with what we go with.
That's funny. Yeah, I like the natural flow, the back and forth.
Yeah. Otherwise it's too, structured. So the coaching program, is it live? Is it video? Is it pre-recorded? Is it other people? Is it one-on-one? I'm interested in the structure.
It's virtual. And I remember the question was on relationships, so we'll go back to that.
Oh, right. It was.
Yeah. So no, it's virtual. I haven't started live events yet. I'm hoping to this year. And so.
But are they live virtual or pre-recorded?
Live virtual.
Okay.
Recorded in case you can't make one of the weeks. It's recorded for you. But most of them are live. I mean, they're all live. Not everybody can attend that particular live event a particular week, so then they get the recording. And I get to, the other thing I'm loving about it is I get to use the themes from all my different retreats. Mm-hmm. So first quarter, we focus on understanding the mind, the ego mind, and what that means and how it works and why we do the things we do and how we sabotage ourselves, and how we can, and how we free ourselves from the self-made prison of fear and lack and limited thinking and defensiveness and judgments and victim consciousness and all that stuff. Second quarter, we focus on empowerment, like what we're talking about today. Third quarter is relationships, because I think that's where most of us give away our power.
I still do it.
Yeah, that seems.
I know to be better, and I still do it.
With some people, it's more with authority figures, bosses, parents, coaches, that kind of thing. But I think for most of us, it's in the intimate, romantic, sexual relationships that where stuff just really gets, our deepest stuff gets triggered, our deepest wounds get triggered, and that's where we stuff ourselves into smaller little packages. So
yeah, my husband and I both have childhood trauma, and although very different childhoods and very different families of origin, the wounds from them are similar. And we're both so hyper aware and both such kind people that we frequently joke that we're going to kill ourselves or kill each other with kindness. And like, we don't always say what we mean because we're afraid of how it will land with the other person. We don't want to hurt them. We don't want to make, neither one of us wants to make the other one feel bad or feel guilty or feel self-conscious. And so I think I find a lot of times, or I feel that we're not really getting to the heart of what is really going on because of that.
Yeah. And so many people like that, Marcy. I definitely used to be that way. Just being nice and not wanting to rock the boat. That's another one of the reasons that we say yes when inside we feel no, or that we fall short of fully communicating what we want and what we need, or of that the reason why we don't have clear boundaries, and so that's part of what we do, because so we talk about how to approach relationships to begin with, how to approach them consciously, right? Because if we're approaching a relationship like hoping that they're going to make us happy, forget it, hang it up. Nobody's going to make us happy. And how unfair to put that responsibility on somebody else. Mm-hmm. So yeah, like only we can make ourselves happy.
That's what this whole podcast is about.
Exactly.
Giving yourself permission to do it.
Exactly.
To get out of your own way.
Exactly, precisely. And then all right, why then we look at stuff like, why do we, because if we don't bring this stuff to consciousness, it's still having an impact on us from the subconscious. So all the previous breakups, all the times that we felt betrayed or were betrayed, or cheated on or abandoned, all that stuff, unless we really deal with it, and not only in therapy, but something even deeper like breath work that handles the stuff that's not anymore in the mental level, but that has been somaticized and lives in the body now. All that stuff doesn't go away, right?
No.
What used to be spiritual teaching, that everything is energy, now we know from quantum physics it's all energy. That means that this desk that chair that I'm sitting on, this desk where my computer is sitting, my body, my emotions, it's all energy. And we know energy cannot be destroyed, it can only change forms. So whenever we stuff all those negative feelings, all those traumas from our past, all the times that we didn't say something because we were being nice or didn't want to rock the boat, all that stuff just gets suppressed and suppressed and suppressed. And we keep stuffing it and stuffing it and stuffing it. And here we go. Here we are trying to have a relationship in the present, and it's all getting filtered through that lifetime of suppressed emotions and unhealed past traumas. Like, yikes. I don't know how any relationships can work because we haven't been taught how to hold them, how to approach them. And we certainly haven't been taught how to clear ourselves from all that repressed emotional baggage. And so that's part of what we do in this year long is clear that stuff.
Where do you even start with that? I've only recently in the last few months become aware of the intergenerational trauma. Like when I was originally writing my book, Permission to Land, I was thinking only about the intergenerational mental illness and addiction, abuse, and so on that I had inherited from my mother. But now I've gone back to my great grandmother who emigrated from Russia during the pogroms of the early 20th century and carried all of that through with the Depression and infant mortality and and World War II and my grandmother, how it goes. And I've realized I sort of, it has allowed me to look at myself much less as a victim and more as just another person in this long family line. And it's liberated me from the whole thing.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And what you're also pointing to is that now we know that trauma gets passed on epigenetically.
Yeah.
The studies that they did with, not only with mice, but with humans, I think it was the grandchildren of Holocaust survivors who exhibited some of the same patterns of behavior that their grandparents did. So yeah, we've got our work to do. And the first step, like where do you start, is becoming aware, right? Becoming self-aware, because we can't do anything about what we don't know, what we can't see. It's just running us and getting in the way of our relationships and our happiness from the subconscious. So the first step is becoming aware of why we do the things we do. And so that's part of what we focus on in this year long too, is like, and part of the beauty of doing it as a group, and I keep it intimate for that sense of like maybe 15, 20 people, just for sense of family.
Sure.
But it's also really beneficial because you learn from each other. Like this person has an insight, and then we're over here. It's like, oh, wow, I never thought about it, but I do a version of that in my own life. So it's like people stop popcorning, with insights, and people having amazing results in this format. So I'm personally, without minimizing the tragic part of it, or the not only in health-wise and death-wise and economically, but I'm grateful for the pandemic, because it helped me, for A, finish this book that I've been brewing for 10 years, and B, forced me to create this program that I've known for years. I needed to create virtual programming, but I didn't.
And now you
need
have the
to.
time.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
Wow. So my mind I have 1,000 questions. So why are you calling all heroes? Can you connect the dots here between the personal power and the heroes?
Yeah, and I write about that in the beginning of the book, what it means to live heroically in the 21st century, when we don't have a horse hitch outside, or most of us don't, and we don't have the armors, and the demons to slay except the ones in our own heads. And so, and that's another thing that the pandemic has benefited us all. It's forced us to, it's expanded the way that we think about heroism. Before that, we used to think, we heard the word hero, we thought of superhero, or maybe a first responder, or maybe a warrior, something like that. Now we include in that word, in that category, our doctors, our nurses, our respiratory therapists, who really behaved heroically, and so many of them committed incredible sacrifices in order to save our lives. And I think we even include in there the delivery people and the grocery store clerks who made so many personal sacrifices to keep us running and fed and supplied. And what about the rest of us? That's what got me thinking about this stuff. And also over the years, noticing that this work that you and I are talking about, it takes courage to look inside and to feel stuff and to remember stuff that isn't pleasant, is not fun. So this process of becoming self-aware and transforming ourselves and stepping into our power and having the kind of relationships that we long for, and the kind of lives that have meaning and purpose, it all begins with that becoming aware. And it's a journey of discovery. And not all of it is fun. In fact, some of it is hard.
No, most of it is not fun at all.
Yeah, like even what we were talking about before, like learning how to say no, learning how to create healthy boundaries, learning how to stand for ourselves. It's heroic stuff, learning how not to react, and rather be developing that skill to take a pause and take a breath. That's and huge. Choosing how we respond to a situation rather than automatic, you hurt me, so I'm going to hurt you right back, which we all know how that ends. It never ends well. No. That ability to bring a choice as to how we're going to be and how we're going to show up in a given situation, that is nothing short of heroic. Yeah. The willingness to take the higher road, even when we're right. That's nothing short of heroic.
So how do people figure that out about themselves? I mean, it's one thing for us to sit here and say that. And in one way or another, a lot of my guests have similar messages. They different modalities, different language, but we're all talking about giving ourselves permission to heal, giving ourselves permission to figure out who we are and unwind the traumatic knots that are in our heads and hearts and souls from the past and so on. But I know how I started it, but how do most people begin the journey? I don't know if what I'm asking even makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, usually, no, it makes total sense. How we usually begin is life throws a curveball our way. We lose a job, like many people have in the pandemic, and it sucked. But how many people are really discovering who they really are and what they want to do with the rest of their lives? Mm-hmm. Or illness, a divorce, a death in the family, some shock that then forces us to ask the difficult existential questions, like who am I and what am I here, and where do I want to go and what do I want to do with this briefest of life that we have. With this blessing of a life, how do I want to make the most of it? So usually that's what gets us going on the heroic journey, on the hero's journey, which is what we're talking about too. All right, so that already happened, and you're like, all right, I got to do something about my life. I think once we make that choice that we want to do something about our lives, a teacher, a book shows up. And one of the ways that I've thought about this book is precisely for that, to walk somebody by the hand, right? The first step for me, as far as I'm concerned, whether we want to have relationships that have a chance at working, or a sense of personal empowerment, or a life that is filled with meaning and purpose, it's like we have to understand the ego mind. And we don't have the time to get into it here. I spent probably the first quarter of the book getting into it and in practical ways so that we see how it's impacting our lives. But here's a quick visual. If you put a baseball in the center of a stadium, that's what the ego is. Who we are it's actually the stadium. And we've allowed this tiny, 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 tiny part of who we are to think that it is all who we are, and to make really important, critical, consequential choices about our lives, about our
Based on a
relationships,
baseball.
from the perspective of the baseball, from its very limited and always fear-based perspective. So that's why we get into trouble, because we're coming from a very limited part of who we are. So, I mean, so much to say
It's a
about
really
that.
good metaphor.
Yeah. The ego is that part of it is that is our sense of individual personality. Like this is Christian, that's Marcy. It's both very helpful in terms of human evolution. And in terms of evolution, we're probably the only species that we know of that has a sense of self, like a sense of individual personality. There are some theories about the higher apes, about the elephants and the dolphins and the whales, whether they have a sense of that they know who they are.
I think
But
my
we don't know
cats
that.
know who they are.
Well, but
I
but
don't know.
here's a no, but here's the thing though. Like we've seen the videos on YouTube. You put a dog or a cat in front of a mirror, they interact with that image as if it was another dog or cat.
That's true.
If you put like a higher primate, a chimp, a gorilla, in front of a mirror, you put ash on their shoulder. At some point, they do this, right? They touch their shoulders, letting us know that they know that's them, that it's just not just another one like them. So something's different going on in the higher primates, and the elephants do that too. But we don't know whether they have a sense of individual personality, which is both, so again, a huge leap in terms of individuality and evolution, but it's also the source of all our suffering. Because that individual sense of who we are is the reason that now we feel separate, we feel alone, we can feel abandoned, we can feel rejected,
right.
all that kind of stuff. We can have a sense of our own mortality. So there's a price to pay for that sense of individuality. And so, but again, critical, that to me, that's step one, understanding the mind, the ego mind, so that we know why we do, begin to understand why we do the things we do.
Yeah, that's huge. So that our behaviors aren't unconscious and just
Exactly.
reactions
Exactly.
from our primitive brains or whatever.
Exactly. And Carl Jung, the psychologist, said, I might be paraphrasing, that the process of enlightenment is making the unconscious conscious.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I see so much of these behaviors with my students, like they make choices, they're 16, 17 years old. So the idea of cause and effect isn't really wired into their brain yet. And I see them, some of them make the right decisions most of the time. And there's just one kid this year who he says he knows what he wants and he's committed to doing the right thing. And he can't keep himself from falling off and self-sabotaging every single time. And
I know. How many adults do we know who do
yeah.
that? Who keep sabotaging the relationships? Sometimes even before the get-go, by attracting the wrong people, by falling for people who are not a match,
Right.
who are not available. They're either already with somebody else, or they live on the other side of the country or something. They're just not there. But so why do we do that? Why? Because from a logical perspective, why would anybody do that? So that's why it's important to understand the subconscious motivators and why we do the things we do, so that we stop doing that kind of stuff to ourselves.
Yeah. For a very long time in my life, I was dating men that were narcissists. That was just their key personality trait, and it was like I was dating men who were like my mom.
Yeah.
In a way to try to, I guess, figure out why my relationship with my mother was the way that it was.
Yeah, no, for sure. I have a friend who is also an author and a yoga teacher, and I love his quote, that it's important to heal. So going back to your permission to heal, it's important to heal our relationship with our parents so that we can stop dating them.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
got to a point where I sat down, I was really quiet with myself. It took a while, not just like one sitting, but quite a while over a period of time. And I made a list of all of the things that I wanted in a life partner. And in some cases, they were literally characteristics that were diametrically opposite of my mom.
Yeah.
So I was using her as like what not to look for. And trial and error, past experience, what do I want my life to look like with somebody? What do I want this relationship to feel like? What needs do I have that I need met? And then from that list, I then created a subset list of things that were absolute deal breakers. That if a man did not have these, 2 or 3 or 4, it was a much smaller list, then we couldn't even finish dinner, like
Yeah.
that was
Yeah,
it.
for sure. And that's we do versions of that process in the quarter on relationships, in the year long, because that's really clear. Like we have to get clear about what we want,
Yeah.
and be proactive rather than just reactive, in relationship to life. Like so we have to get clear and send the message to life. Okay, this is what I'm looking for.
Right. So it was like manifesting the right thing. If
Yeah.
if you're thinking about that, like sending that out into the universe. And I had it typed on my cell phone. And I remember very boldly on a first date with a guy, just handing him my phone with the list on it. And I said, so check them
That's
off.
funny. That is funny. That is funny. Yeah. Yeah. And so that took effort, right? That took
Yeah.
work.
Yeah.
Um, and so that's what I mean by heroic. It takes work to work on ourselves and to get free, but the rewards are infinite. It's so worthwhile because that's how we free ourselves from all these subconscious patterns. That's how we can bring choice back into the equation.
Mm-hmm.
That's why we can stop sabotaging ourselves and our lives and our relationships. But going back, first got to start by becoming aware of even the patterns. And why do we get triggered by certain people and certain situations when other people don't? And why do we keep attracting certain kind of people to get in relationship with, that sometimes feels like you were saying, it's like the same old boring movie, just with a different actors. The co-lead is different, but it's the same boring movie, the same arguments, same stuff coming up, same old crap.
Yeah. And it wasn't until I learned how to voice my needs, to assert my own healthy boundaries, and filter out all of the old repeating phrases, all the old repeating behaviors, that I was even capable of my half of a healthy relationship.
That's right. That's right. And then to realize that a lot of this stuff isn't even ours, like you were talking about.
Yeah.
Like a lot of these beliefs and these behaviors, they're not even ours. We just took them on from our parents and our grandparents, and it's just been passed on. And
my
from
grandmother
the culture
was the one who gave me dating advice initially. And so she was giving me dating advice from when she dated my grandfather in the late 1930s.
Can you imagine?
And so in the 80s and the 90s and the early 2000s, I was still using grandma's dating advice. And
can you imagine?
It worked for her, but I wouldn't want her marriage. I mean, she and my grandfather found happiness, but there was still a lot of strife and a lot of passive aggressive bullshit that I would not want to live with. And so that's where that got me. Was
right. At a
my
time
grandmother's marriage.
Yeah. And that's the stuff that we're even aware of. Like a lot of the stuff that we believe in and take on, and we're not even conscious of.
No.
It's like, yikes.
Yeah. Well, I didn't know that was what I was doing until I got to my 40s and I was already divorced and I was dating for 10 years. And I was like, well, where the hell am I getting this idea from? This is bullshit. If I pretend to like sports because the guy I'm dating likes sports, then I'm going to be stuck being a sports fan for the rest of my life. And
exactly.
And I'm going to resent watching every freaking game because I don't really give a shit, Right. Unless my kid's playing in the game, I don't care who wins.
Right. And then that resentment just doesn't go away. It starts building,
right.
And it turns into what you were just talking about. It turns into passive aggressive behavior.
Right. And then the guy thinks he's dating a woman who loves sports. So I'm not even a real person anymore.
That's right. And so how can we expect to be loved authentically for who we are if we're not presenting ourselves, if we're not showing up authentically as who we are?
Right.
It's like that's a setup for failure.
Yeah. So the version of me that I became when I was married to my first husband is a character in a fantasy novel. She
Yeah.
doesn't exist.
That's right.
And 12 years in or 11 years in, and I was just like, what the freaking hell am I doing?
And a fantasy novel from the 1930s.
Right. Exactly. 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 And I had this epiphany one night, and I realized I was miserable and I was lonely, and we had no connection and we had nothing in common. And the days that he said he was working late, or he was, otherwise occupied with other things and he wasn't going to be home until later, I was liberated and happy. And what the hell kind of relationship is that? And I
I know.
realized I had this epiphany. I don't want this marriage for my children. I wouldn't want them to grow up and have a relationship like this. And if I don't get out now, this is going to be the template they have for relationships for their whole life, unless, they meet Christian de la Huerta and they can change it.
Well, but Marcy, let's focus on that choice, because that was heroic. In your courage, I mean, that took courage for you to say, I have to get out, not only for my own freedom and my own happiness, but for the sake of my kids. I'm not passing this shit on. Like,
right.
The DNA chains it stops here, right?
And the idea, like so many people say, I'm staying in the marriage until my kids graduate high school, or I'm staying in for the kids. Well, what are you teaching them by doing that? If you're miserable enough to have that thought creep into your consciousness,
yeah,
I'm going to curse right now. Get the fuck out of that relationship.
Yeah,
because it's not what you want to pass on.
Exactly. And that's what I tell, people who come to me with that quandary, with that conflict. And it's tough. It's incredibly tough choice. But what I say is like, look, the greatest gift you can give your children is to be the most that you can be and to be the happiest that you can be.
Exactly.
That's what they're going to take from you more than anything else.
Yeah. And I've heard both of my kids, they're going to, this month, they're going to be 21 and 24. So we've come a long way. But both of them have said to me at different times that from me, they've learned that change is possible. That if they don't like a situation, or they don't find themselves happy or fulfilled, or they're not getting meaning, or their needs aren't being met, that it's better to walk away as soon as you realize that than it is to stay.
And that's priceless. That is exactly. A priceless gift.
Exactly. I'm thrilled, because that's what I wanted to pass along, not the toxicity of a marriage. So
exactly. And the prison, because it's we let ourselves be stuck in prisons of our own making.
Yeah. There's a point that I remember sitting with my therapist years ago, and I felt like I was in this situation, that I was powerless. And I'm like, I am just stuck. I could not see a way out. And I felt like I was, on the Titanic, strapped to the wall. I was just going to go down with the boat. And she looked at me and she said, you always have a choice. You might not like the choices that are available. They might be harder, more difficult, or more painful than you want to deal with. But you always have a choice.
Yes.
And I sat there on her couch and pondered that for a little while. It took me a few minutes to just let that sink in, and she was right.
And now you take us to like the most heroic point in our heroic journey of empowerment and liberation, which is personal responsibility. That's the toughest one for people to really get, that no matter what happened in the past, and I know horrible things happen to people that should have never happened, and I'm so sorry about that, but that no matter what happened and no matter what happens going forward, we always get to choose how we show up in response. And from that perspective, even from that perspective, we get to free ourselves from victim consciousness. Right. If only it hadn't been this way, if only mom or dad or the teacher, the minister, society, sexism, racism, homophobia, not to deny that any of those things exist or that none of our traumas happen. It's not about denying that. No, it's about saying that if we want to be free, we have to at some point get to the point of saying, like, you know what, that sucked and I wish I hadn't been that way. And what am I going to do about it? What am I going to do in response? And Marcy, that is nothing short of heroic. It is.
Yeah, because it's much easier to put your head in the sand and not do anything about it.
And give our power away,
Right.
right? Because as long as we're holding anybody or anything outside of ourselves, whether it was mom or dad or a system, societal unfair system, as long as we're blaming that, which is convenient and it's easier to do, but we're giving our power away and we're never going to free ourselves. Right? That's the payoff. We get to say, well, if only it hadn't been that way, if it only wasn't that way.
Yeah.
So it's a nice, comfortable excuse, but it keeps us in prison. We keep giving our power away, sometimes even to the perpetrator. So I don't see a way around that.
No. For me, I always think back. There was frequent listeners of the podcast will know that I've sort of touched on this before, but there was a movie that came out, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago called Letters to Juliet. And in the letter to Juliet that we find out in the climax of the story,
you're going to give it away? You're going to spoil it?
Well, the letter just used the powerful phrase, what if? Not like, what if I do this and the earth falls in and I get swallowed, or the dragon comes and breathes fire and burns me to death. No. But what if I do this and it turns out great? What if I risk this and I get everything I ever wanted? What if I do this and it doesn't work out the way I want, but I learned something?
That's right.
To me, the only failure is not trying.
Yeah, I agree. And when we look at it from that perspective, there are no failed relationships.
Right.
As long as we're learning, as long as we're growing, as long as we're becoming better human beings and more empowered persons, then, hey, that's what it took to get us to where we are today.
Exactly. So, I hear people, like I've had a lot of friends who were divorced, and I hear them say things like, oh, I wish I never married so-and-so. And I'm like, well, at least you got your kids out of it. At least you learned to not be the person you were then. And you're now a different person now. And if that evolution needed that, there always has to be some sort of negative circumstance or at least circumstance of lack, or however you want to phrase that, to push any revolution forward or evolution forward.
Yeah, that's one of the myths that we get into about relationships in the year long too, and in my book. The other one, is that we have to be with somebody till death do us part. It's like, wait a minute, who said? Who made that up? Somebody made that up along the way.
Well, that was much easier to do when the life expectancy was 40.
Yeah. And so, yeah, as long as we're growing, and that's my measurement for how long to stay, because we can't go by the ups and the downs necessarily, because every relationship is going to have ups and downs.
Sure.
And sometimes what we do, we're in one of the down cycles and we say, well, that's it, I'm out. And I'm not suggesting staying in longer than we need to. So, but my measurement to determine how long to stay is growth happening? Mm-hmm. Am I growing? Am I becoming a better, more empowered, more fulfilled human being? Then that, maybe it's not time to go yet. I don't know.
No, and are you getting your needs met? You might not be getting all of your needs met all the time, because that would be ridiculous. But the majority of the deal breakers, are you getting those needs met? Do you feel that your partner is kind and supportive and loving? Are you being loved the way you need to be loved? And is that other person allowing you to love the way that makes you feel good as a person? If you can't answer yes to those questions, then don't stay.
Yeah. And that's another really good exercise that we also do in my retreat and in my year-long coaching program is what are the negotiables and what's not negotiable.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it teaches us what boundary setting is. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Which I don't think I understood until I was like 48. And then I was like, oh, that's what they mean. Oh, I understand what's okay and what's not okay. I get it.
What works for us, what doesn't work for us.
Exactly. So are you ready for some quick questions?
Sure.
Okay. So what 6 words would you use to describe yourself?
Wow. Well, let me answer it this way. Somebody asked me recently, what are your greatest contributions? And I would say my capacity to love. That's 4 words, what? My
Mm-hmm.
capacity to love and the depth of my surrender.
Wow.
So I think I
That's
went over,
beautifully poetic.
yeah, I think I went over 6, but
I don't care. That wins. That wins. It's the best answer so far. What's your favorite way to spend a day?
huh. All right. Depends. Sometimes where I feel most connected is out in nature, whether it's a beautiful beach, and I'm from an island, so I love a beautiful beach. And I've also got some incredible magical mountain spots. Um, and there's sometimes if I've been working, um, and the type of work that I do for an introvert is like I'm burning extra energy.
Yes.
Like especially if I'm gone for 3 weeks and I'm on, doing event after event. Um, the way that I refuel and re-energize is by myself. So sometimes Netflix therapy,
Mm-hmm.
it's what I need. I don't want to think. I don't want to talk to anybody. I don't want to save the world. I just want to like tune out.
Yeah, that's what I did last Saturday. I was so burnt and so exhausted that I got up in the morning and I had some breakfast and I laid on the couch and I watched old reruns of Big Bang Theory and I played Animal Crossing on my Switch for like 7 hours.
Yeah, sometimes that's what I need too. Just disconnect and not think.
And I forced myself not to feel guilty about it because that's also my MO.
Yeah,
Productivity always. And some days, no.
always. Yeah.
Some days, no. Okay, number 3. What is your favorite childhood memory?
We used to go to this beach, this world famous Cuban beach called Varadero every summer. And sometimes rent a house right on the beach. And those were like my most idyllic, fun, and being 9 of us. Well, we weren't all born then. The last one was born in Spain in exile. But having so many kids, we were very self-sufficient, and we used to just have such a great time, just playing. Um, and so I think that was when I think back about my life, those were the years of innocence. When we left Cuba, that we had to grow up really fast, especially my oldest sister and I, first and second. My mom, understandably, was so overwhelmed with so many kids.
Mm-hmm.
Um, she left Cuba when she was 8 months pregnant, so my sister and I had to grow up fast and help take care of the younger ones. So.
Wow. That must be, you could write a memoir about that. That's an incredible experience. Okay. What is your favorite meal?
Huh. Wow, there's so many foods I love. I love Asian food. I love Mexican. Um, but if if I were gonna have a final, if I got the memo, right, you're getting transferred to another planet, my final meal would have to include at least a slice of pizza.
Okay. That makes sense. Nothing
Yeah,
beats pizza.
and dark chocolate.
Oh my God. Yes. Yes. We had this whole argument in the faculty room at school a couple of weeks ago. Somebody was selling chocolate and all of the dark chocolate was gone. And like incredulously, like, why are you all idiots eating the dark chocolate when the milk chocolate is here? And it was like we were all fighting.
Yeah, no, I don't do milk chocolate and white
No.
chocolate. To me,
Oh God.
that's not even chocolate.
That's not even chocolate. I don't know what that is. That's something else entirely. What one piece of advice would you like to give your younger self?
To hang in there and to smile and be hopeful, because like if I were speaking to younger me, it's like you have no idea um, who you're going to become, and you're going to get through all this stuff, and you're going to have an incredible magical life. And so just hang in there. It's going to get way, way, way better.
That's very hopeful. And I hope your younger self would have listened to you.
Yeah. And you know what's interesting is that my whole life was my whole adolescence was one long depression, one with suicidal fantasies.
Really?
And flashing forward, like these days, no matter what happens in my life, no matter the details, the circumstances, whether a relationship works out or it doesn't, whether a project succeeds or it fails, in quotes, never, ever, ever, ever do I question my sense of self. And that too, like my self acceptance, my level of self love are established and unshakable. And if that can
Beautiful.
happen to me, I know it can happen. It can happen to anybody watching this and listening to this.
I agree.
And that's what I guide the reader through in the book and in my retreats and my coaching program, to get to that place of freedom and empowerment and self-love. It's ultimately about that, isn't it?
Ultimately, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Well, this feeds directly into the next question. So, what is the one thing you would most like to change about the world?
I think that self-love.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, but going back to what we were talking about before too, if we understand the ego, because the ego is the source of all conflict, whether it's interpersonal in our relationships, and the reason we get stuck in power struggles,
Or
and
international.
or international, it all comes back to the ego. So I think that if we all understood that, we would live in a very different world.
I agree. 100%. Okay, now this is really trivial in comparison to how profound that was, but what TV shows are you binging right now?
That's funny. I've actually been binging on Netflix Spanish language series, and there's some really good ones. Um, and the reason for that is, Spanish is my first language, but I'm actually translating the book to Spanish. And I hired somebody to do it. But when I started reading it, it was like, wait a minute, that's not what I meant at all, because he was translating literally.
Right.
And so there's some things that don't translate.
No, there's a lot of idiomatic phrases that you can't translate literally.
Yeah, so it just didn't make any sense. In Spanish, it's like, no, not at all. I would never say that. So then it took, all right, what I thought to myself, I mean, in life, you get away with it, because if you do Spanglish, if you can't think of a word in one, then you throw in a word from another language.
Sure.
But if I'm going to teach and do podcast interviews in Spanish, I don't want to do that. I want to be able to do it at least 95%, 99% in Spanish. So I've been consciously, it's been like Netflix right? I've been consciously watching it, and I watch it so that I can listen to it in Spanish, and I do the subtitles in Spanish too, so that I can get it both visually and auditorily. And I'm expanding I can tell already, I'm expanding my vocabulary and my ability to express myself in Spanish.
That's beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
I took Spanish in high school and in college, and I took immersion weekends because I struggled. I could not get the vocabulary to stick in my brain. And I could understand grammar, the structure of a sentence in Spanish, but I didn't have enough vocabulary cemented in my head to be able to say anything substantive. And it was one of the most frustrating experiences.
But it's in there, Marcy. I think if you place yourself in an immersive situation, where you had to, then you would be surprised about how much of it would start coming back.
One day, maybe.
And that's part of the reason that I went to Ecuador too. Like we were talking before we started recording about me being in a nomadic phase.
Yeah.
Part of the reason I many other reasons too, but one of the reasons I wanted to be was to immerse myself in a Spanish-speaking culture, so that I was forced to express myself.
Makes sense. I've had these on and off fantasies about moving to Barcelona when I retire.
Oh, I might meet you there sometime. I love that city. What a beautiful city.
Oh, that would immerse me into the whole thing right there. Beautiful. Beautiful. Well, this has been wonderful, Dr. Christian de la Huerta. I love this. This is wonderful. So in the show notes, if you are listening and you scroll down, will be all manner of ways to get in touch with Dr. Christian de la Huerta. Socials and where to buy his book and where to find him and to sign up for his retreats and his coaching program and all that sort of stuff. So as long as you're not driving, scroll down.
Thank you for saying that, Marcy. And by the way, I'm not a doctor. I don't have a PhD.
Oh, no? Well,
No,
okay.
no.
Maybe you just seem so,
But thank you. Thanks for having me on the show. I'm glad that we got it recorded this time. And thanks for having the show. I know that in your willingness to do that and to overcome any other tendencies to not do it, whether fear or laziness or shyness or whatever, that in your willingness to do it, you many lives are being touched. So thank you.
I appreciate that. It's still a small podcast, it's very on the community level, which is totally fine with me. We just reached 41,000 downloads this week, actually. And
congrats.
Thank you. And, I have no budget. So it's just me and whatever money I throw at marketers to get the name out there and word of mouth and social media. And I am grateful for my listeners who keep coming back and keep giving recommendations and reviews. And it's organically fabulous. I just love everything about it.
Beautiful. Congrats and keep on doing it.
Thanks. All right. I'm going to end the recording. I am very proud of this Permission to Heal podcast. I want to thank all of you for listening each week, and I'm so glad that it speaks to you. Creating and producing this podcast brings joy to my life, but honestly, I need your help because I find commercials annoying when I listen to podcasts. I don't have commercials on Permission to Heal. I pay for the costs of creating, producing, and marketing this podcast out of my own pocket, and I'm happy to do so, except that times are kind of tough right now, and I could use your help. So through Patreon and a Patreon subscription, you can support the Permission to Heal podcast and help ensure that I'm able to make more episodes and share them with the world. There are several subscription levels that come with different perks and swag. If you're able to, and if you are inclined to, I would really, really appreciate your help. Please go to www.patreon.com/permission to heal. Patreon, patreon.com/permission to heal. And it's linked in the show notes. So scroll down, click away. Thank you so much for your consideration. I hope you and your families are well and happy. If you love Permission to Heal, and I know you do, then please like, follow, share, and consider writing a review. These simple activities will go a long way to making Permission to Heal more visible and available to a larger audience. I need your help. Getting the word out about PTH and your like, follow, share, and review are exactly what I need to make that happen. Thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate you. Thank you for joining me for this episode of Permission to Heal. I hope you found it moving and inspirational. Please remember, you don't need anyone else's permission to trust and follow your heart. You have the power within you. Subscribe to Permission to Heal so you don't miss any new episodes, and please share this with your friends.